Hello everyone, my name is Alex. I'm a 2000 rated over-the-board chess player, and in this series we're going from 1500 to 2000 elo in chess.com rapid games, where I'll be explaining my thought process as best as I possibly can for your education and entertainment. Today we have a caro-kann defense. My opponent goes for the two pawns approach and goes for the exchange variation. Now, in theory, we have now two central pawns, and white only has one central pawn, right? We've traded the c pawn for the e pawn. But a lot of people struggle in the exchange variation from the black side. You can get this kind of Carlsbad structure with the pawns like this, which, if you're not familiar, can be a little bit difficult to navigate. However, knight to f3 is not a particularly testing line. I will show you after the game some of the more testing lines, including bishop to d3, and why that is a more testing line. Also c4, which is what I personally play. But okay, knight to f3. We'll go knight to c6. And essentially, we would like to see this bishop commit itself to the d3 square, and then we will put our bishop on g4, play e6 at some point, locking this pawn chain shut, and have a very nice game. Now, the reason that bishop d3 is quite a strong move is because there's a very annoying line after knight c6, if my computer allows me, pawn to c3, again, if my computer allows me. There we go. Yeah, bishop d3, knight c6, pawn c3, defending the pawn. And then after we go knight to f6, move pawn to h3. And the reason that is so annoying for black is because white takes away the f5 square because his bishop protects it, and he takes away the g4 square because his pawn protects it, which means that our bishop doesn't have a good place to go, and theoretically, we will have to play the move pawn to e6 without being able to get this bishop outside of the pawn chain, and kind of get a French bishop, right? The French bishop being a bishop stuck behind this e6 pawn and being pretty useless. I think a video a couple of days ago I released, my opponent had such a French bishop and basically lost the game because it was so bad, and we exploited that. So okay, bishop d3. I don't like starting with bishop to g4 because it encourages bishop to e2, breaking the pin, right? But if we wait for bishop d3, knight c6 is basically a waiting move. I'm waiting for him to commit the bishop somewhere else and then put my bishop on g4, because now I'm saying, well, bishop e2 makes no sense because you just developed your bishop. Although I think in some lines the computer actually likes bringing the bishop back. But of course, from a human perspective, that is very difficult to admit that you put the bishop on the wrong square and waste a full move. And now we can go ahead and play e6 with no worries, because our bishop is outside the pawn chain. We can lock it shut with e6, get our bishop out, get our knight out, castle kingside probably, and have a very nice game. My opponent goes pawn to c3 because we are pinning the knight, and maybe we're threatening to take on d4, although that may be tactics, but there is no bishop b5 check because our knight covers that square. But c3 is always a good move in these lines, and let's go pawn to e6. Knight f6 is also completely fine. And as you can see, this pawn structure is very typical of the caro-kann exchange variation. If you play the caro-kann and you play the exchange variation, this is likely the pawn structure that you will get. It's obviously very natural for both sides to do this, to just add support for their central pawn. And it's known as the Carlsbad structure. h3, we don't need to take, we can just drop our bishop back. g4, we will drop our bishop back, and an exchange like this is very good for us because we can open up our rook on the h-file, and the h3 pawn will be heavily weakened because the g pawn will be advanced. King f1 looks like a mouse slip to me. I don't believe that he intentionally played king to h1. Sorry, king to f1. I assume he meant to castle, but okay. We'll make the most of it. Let's go bishop to d6. I don't want to go knight to f6 because one, bishop to g5 is annoying, pinning the knight, but also I feel like it's a good idea to take away the option of bishop to f4. So similar to how my opponent had an opportunity to take away my bishop's two good squares, but didn't, I'm basically trying to do that to my opponent's dark squared bishop, right? So hopefully that makes sense. Knight G to E7 looks very tempting. But to be honest, I think Knight F6 is perfectly reasonable. Because, again, if bishop to G5 now, then my opponent has just wasted a full tempo going bishop to E3. I assume he's preparing knight B to D2, protecting this knight and allowing this queen to move somewhere else. Yeah, he does knight B to D2. And I think queen to C7 is a very normal move here. So bishop G5 never comes with a pin. We are, of course, exerting a lot of pressure on this diagonal. Maybe we're even trying to play E5, and we're preemptively defending B7. One of the things to know in the exchange variation is that B7 can become quite weak, because the queen will most likely come to B3 at some point. So defending it preemptively is a good idea, although we do often start a minority attack on the queen side with something like pawn to A6, pawn to B5. Also worth noting, this queen often comes to C2, but he goes to E2, which is a bit strange. I have to admit, that's a bit strange. Okay, now we could castle. What I was going to say with queen C2 is that, oh my god, is that we sometimes have like ideas of going rook to C8 and hopping our knight into not really D4 because it's protected very well, but a square like B4 and getting some kind of exchange that is beneficial for us, if that makes sense, where we sack the knight, we win the bishop, trade the queens, and ruin the white pawn structure. But we don't have that. Queen E2 is on the board. And we could, of course, go ahead and castle. I'm slightly concerned about bishop to G5, though, because I'm not really sure what I'm going to do with my knight on F6. We could drop it back to D7, I suppose. We could also just play pawn to A6, preparing pawn to B5. We could go rook to B8, preparing pawn to B5, which potentially makes the minority attack quicker because we can go A5 immediately rather than building it up with A6 first. So something like rook B8, if bishop to G5, then I think we can allow this trade, because often the king is actually relatively safe in the center of the board. But we could just go knight back to D7, which is probably easier, and this bishop serves very little purpose if we do that. By the way, if you're enjoying this video so far, hopefully you're learning a lot. Please drop a like and subscribe if you haven't already. I would really appreciate it. So, okay, rook B8. Also, this is really strong because the king can't get out of the way to move the rook. So maybe G3 will have to be played, which, you know, there's potential sacrifices in the future, maybe, that we could pull off under the right circumstances. Queenside castle is sometimes an idea, but here it seems completely unnecessary. We'll go rook to B8. If pawn to A4, stopping our advancement, then I suppose we could try and insist with pawn to A6, and there's no pawn to A5 trying to take en passant, because we will just take with the knight, because we control that square 2 times. So if pawn A4, pawn A6, I don't think white... Oh no, he can, because he has these two watching it as well. So maybe the immediate pawn A6 was better, although if pawn A6, then A4 all the same. A3, though, is a bit odd. A little bit odd. We still can't push this because white will just take. And that doesn't really work. So I guess pawn A6 anyway. Maybe the rook shouldn't have gone to B8. I'll check with the engine after the game, because I'm still kind of learning myself with these minority attacks in the exchange variation, like whether the rook should be on A8, B8, or C8. I'm not 100% sure. Okay, yeah, rook to C1 is not a problem. We'll play pawn to B5, clamping down on the C4 square. We can potentially rotate in a knight. Rook C1, I don't think that move does anything. Now, of course, if we were to play a move like castles here, then C4 would probably be quite strong. That is very committal. Super committal. And in many lines, we can play the move pawn to A5, breaking this up. Here, I don't think quite so much, though. Because if, like, take, then the rook opens up. We also can't play knight to a5, knight to c4 anymore, because the pawn does control the a5 square. However, we could rotate this knight in via d7 and b6, which could be nice. Very interesting. Okay. Also, always keep an eye on this move e5. It's a very common move in these positions. To be fair, we could castle and prepare the move e5, which, to be honest, looks really good. Let's castle. I mean, white has no play. He doesn't have pawn to c4. If pawn to a4, you could play that. You could. I'm not convinced that it's that good, though. Because if I just defend my pawn with a move like, I don't know, maybe queen to b7, not queen to b6, because then e5, we could have discoveries on the queen, right? So if something like a4, queen b7, you can't add any more attackers to the b5 square. I'm also getting my queen off of the c-file, which is potentially useful because, you know, this is a little bit annoying. And maybe we can even play for pawn a5 ourselves in some lines. But if not, we could always just go like, let's say a4, queen b7. I don't know what white can really do, but we could rotate our knight to d7, b6, and c4. Or we could just play pawn to e5. We could even prepare with rook to e8. This looks really, really good. Really good. And the white pieces, you know, they look like they're doing a good job in the center, but I would argue they're not doing all that much. I mean, this knight is pinned, obviously. The queen is staring at nothing. Okay, g4 was going to come up there, going to come at some point. So I suppose we just retreat the bishop. And if takes, there is a very strong case for taking with the f-pawn and opening up our rook. Because if we take with the h-pawn, then this is quite scary, right? So I'm actually going to take with the f-pawn. Now, of course, we do have to be aware that the queen could take on e6 with check, but this bishop has no useful discoveries, right? If a move like bishop to g5, obviously we will not play knight d7 and blunder the e6 pawn. I think pawn to e5 is very strong, so we're going to play it. And we're going to try and really tear open the center while the white king is compromised, right? Definitely compromised. Will the engine approve this? I'm not 100% sure, but this looks very good to me. This looks really good. I mean, this c3 pawn is so bad. It's such a bad pawn as well. Okay, let's take. My opponent may want to play bishop to d4, trying to get some trades. Because, of course, if something like take, then the pawn structure becomes symmetrical. What? What is that? Okay, well, that's a free pawn, and I don't really see a reason not to grab it. Yeah, I'm very confused. Taking with the bishop potentially runs into some problems, right? But taking with the queen, we hit a3. We do have to be aware that our bishop could be vulnerable. Okay, well, that's not a very testing move, I don't think. We could support the bishop, but I think I prefer just dropping... Okay, not back to c7, because then we get hit with this. So maybe just back to d6. Yeah. And we're still hitting this. If bishop to d4, then we just take, I guess. Also, by moving the knight away from d2, you grant us the e4 square for our knight, potentially. Okay, queen to e3, offering a queen trade. I think rook to c8 would probably be the best move here. This is one of those situations where you're like, oh my god, I'm a pawn up. Let's trade the queens, rook takes, and we'll convert the endgame. Well, it's not quite that simple in my mind, because yes, we have a passed d pawn, but it's also an isolated pawn, and for the time being, it's safe. But white has incredible control over the d4 square, and when combating an isolated pawn, normally you want to try to control the square in front of the pawn to stop it from moving down the board and becoming a problem, right? So if I just take, this pawn is great, but it's also maybe a liability, right? And if this is my only advantage, which it is, because I'm a pawn up, then is it enough to win the game? That I'm not sure about. So rook b to c8 makes a lot of sense to me, because I'm like, okay, if you want to trade, that's fantastic. I'll hit this, I'll have pressure here, and I still have activity, right? I have a lot of activity there. So my opponent doesn't. He goes rook h2 e1, which isn't very concerning. The rook isn't that great. Now the question is, how do we apply more pressure? How do we apply more pressure? Unclear. I'd love to play this, but of course that just blunders the game. We're just losing everything. We could play rook f to e8. Bishop to d4 is potentially on the way, like taking the knight and then taking here, which is annoying. So I have to be very aware of that. Maybe rook f to d8, just defending the d5 pawn. Or, you know, I will be. Not so easy. This move is very annoying if it comes at the right moment. Although I suppose it would block the control of this. So something like bishop d4, take, and knight to e4. Maybe there's potential, you know, for this kind of thing. Although the knight would be hit and the bishop's in the way anyway, so that's probably fine. Alright, alright. What can we do here? What can we do? Well, we could play a move like queen b2, trying to play rook to c3. But we still get hit with bishop d4, and not having the option to trade queens, I think that's probably very good for white, so I don't really want to allow that. I think both of these pieces are well placed. I think my bishop's well placed. My knight, I mean, has to be defending this pawn. So I guess my f rook should probably be improved. Although, like, I don't know, maybe there's tactics here. I don't know in the future. How also g5, is g5 on the way to kick my knight away? It might actually be. It might actually be on the way. Huh. How do I stop that? Okay. Let's say g5 happens. My knight can go to h5 and has some interesting forking ideas on f4. But that is currently controlled by the bishop, right? What can I do here? I think rook fe8 is the move. I think this is the move. And I'm essentially thinking that there could be some moments. Of course, if this bishop goes to d4, then this square could open up, right? I'm thinking that there could be some moments where basically, let's say a trade like this happens, maybe my knight could come in and the bishop might be pinned to the rook. Yeah, he does play it. Okay, well, I think I have to start with a queen trade, because otherwise he's going to take here with check, and I'm going to lose very quickly. So let's trade the queens. I think that's basically forced. My opponent's fighting back so well. If knight h5, rook d5, I don't have knight here. So let's say, you know, knight here, rook here, knight here. He can take, because after takes, like, it's defended by the knight. So maybe knight h5, rook d5, bishop to f4. And if you take, then I'll take with check and pick up the rook. Maybe that's a shout. I like that. Also, if this rook takes on d5, which, I mean, it probably should, then it does open up possibilities of coming to c3 and applying a lot of pressure to this a pawn. So this looks very natural to me. Very natural. And this rook's got to keep an eye on the bishop, otherwise I'll just win a pawn. And rook to c3 could come with a lot of pressure. Also, my knight defends g7, which is potentially useful, because like if the bishop comes to d4 and the rook comes to d7, that could be annoying. Rook c5. Really? Now if I take... If pawn takes... Is that playable? Maybe. That might actually be playable. Okay, if I take here... Rook c8, rook c8, rook e3. Yeah, that's... Okay. So, what if I just go rook to d8 and get out of the way? If rook to c6 going after a6, though, that looks strong and very annoying. I don't really have an answer. I'm not playing rook a8. That's way too passive. That looks horrific. What if I go bishop back to d6? It feels wrong. He could repeat and I'll have to come up with a different plan. But if bishop back to d6, take. I'm threatening an invasion, so let's say bishop d4 stopping that. If I give a check, maybe I can jump my knight in somehow. Maybe. My opponent's playing this very well, being very stubborn. Yeah, if I move my rook, then this rook just invades. That's the problem. That's the big issue. And if I take, if bishop takes, then I feel like that's winning. Because I'll take the rook and go bishop to c1, and this pawn will be a goner. The issue is, however, what do I do if pawn takes? What do I do if pawn takes? That's my issue. Because that's actually very far advanced, and it's difficult for me to deal with. And I don't have a good answer. So, this seems to be the best move I can come up with. Bishop back to d6. Like I said, rook d5 would be like a repetition, and then I'll have to come up with something else. Okay, he takes though. Alright, let's take back. We have access to the f4 square, which could be useful for rotating the knight. If rook, also we have access to c3, which could be useful. Rook d1, yeah, that makes sense. Where do we want to... I think we want to put the bishop on f8. That feels very natural to me. Although, if we do that, then the knight can't get into the game, right? This bishop locks the knight out of the game. So maybe bishop b8? Or, well, no, actually, no. We can go bishop f4. Yeah, we can go bishop f4. Yeah, okay, that looks fine. That looks fine. Because, well, we can't really take, I don't think. Because then the pawn takes and our knight is still stuck. Okay, rook to d7 I wasn't too concerned about, to be honest. We could try and be tricky with rook to c2, threatening this because the pawn would be pinned. If rook c2 take, king g3, we don't have anything amazing there. We could go rook to c3, but again, there's this bishop to d4 idea going after this. But, as I said before, the knight does defend g7. So let's say rook to c3. My opponent can't do this because I'll take and cover. And if here check, whoops, if here and check, I can just run. Check, run. Check. Well, then you'd hang the rook. So I think this is the best move. I don't think I'm blundering anything, and I think my king is safe. My knight, although it's on the edge of the board, is defending this very important square. Very important square. If take, I'll take back with check, and that looks very good. King g3, because you need to protect the knight. My knight is under attack, though. Yeah, this I wasn't concerned about. I'll just move the king. And then this is still hanging. This is still hanging, because, you know, I'm threatening to take. You could try rook to h8, going after the h7 pawn. Really? What does that do? I mean, you're not trying to do this, surely, because I'll just move. And there's nothing. So why can't I just take? Rook takes a3. You could go knight to d4, because that would set up rook f8 to be checkmate. Is that a mating net? No way is that a mating net. That's unreal. What? Take knight d4. How do I get out? I think I'm just trapped. Because you take away my last square on e6. Oh, wow. That's really cool. That's really cool. Okay. How on earth do I deal with that? How do I deal with that? Do I go pawn to h6? And if knight to d4 I can take? Well, no, because even though I get this square, it's covered by the rook. That's no good. Oh, wow. What? Do I just have to go king e6 then? I guess? Yeah, that has to be the move. That's the only move, I think. Oh my days. What is this absolute mess? Well, this is one of the most exciting endgames I've seen in a while. Also note, if my bishop can get out of the way, then knight f3 will come with check, and I'll pick up the h3 pawn by force. This is still hanging. Okay. The knight gives the check. Now, I only have one square, I think. Well, unless I go back here and just get mated. So let's not do that. Let's move up the board. I couldn't see anything great. He could go bishop to d6? Oh, that's a move. Kind of. And he's setting this up as well. Oh, wow. How is he finding these moves? How do I defend that? Do I have to go rook c4? I guess? Yeah, that has to be the move. Because I need to add as many layers of protection as I can. That check I wasn't as concerned about, to be honest. Do I move up the board, or do I move across? If I move here... this check covers this. Then I move in with tempo. If here, then I take here. If here, I can always take with check. Difficult decision. I'm going to do this, though. If a check on f8, I think I can get away with taking on g5. Although, maybe I can't. Pawn h4, if I take, then take. But then I have takes. King f3. Wow, okay. That's a move. That's a move. I have no check, because that's covered very nicely. Can I just take, though? I think I can. I don't see a reason not to. Oh, wait, no, have I blundered this? Oh, no way, I blundered that. And then the king has to move away from the defense of the... Yeah. I only considered rook f8, but then I can just go bishop to f6. This is insane play for a 1500. What? Absolutely nuts. Yeah, I just lose the bishop. Wow. And I don't see how I can create enough counterplay. I'm going to go knight to f6. If take, then I'll take, I think. Just to try to improve the pawns. And maybe push the f pawn and the g pawn. This is unbelievable play. I'm not accusing my opponent of cheating or anything, but like the speed at which he's finding these incredibly strong moves, it's really strange. It's really strange. Okay, let's move the king then. I mean, we'll check in the post-game analysis anyway. Also, this is a threat now. This is a threat because take, take, take. And then I win back the piece. Okay, moves the king, so if take, then take. I can give a check. King goes here. Yeah, then I'm kind of out of squares. So this makes a lot of sense to me. Applying pressure to the knight and preparing rook a2 to go after this a3 pawn, which is definitely a weakness. That's a strange move. Okay. Well, I suppose we'll go after the pawn anyway. Oh, wait. I just missed that. No, I completely missed that. Although, what can I do? I don't think I have any moves anyway. Unbelievable play. Unbelievable play. Yeah, that's just game, innit? That's just game. I don't see how he's playing such good moves so quickly. I don't get it. We'll play on. We'll play on to see how he responds to the rest of my moves, because that can be a very good indicator as to whether someone is cheating or not. I don't want to throw out accusations, but like this feels so weird. So weird. Yeah, I feel like I can't do anything, to be honest. Let's just move the king to defend the knight, because, you know, this is potentially happening. I just want to see how he handles the position, because then it'll make it clearer. But it's interesting, because all of his moves are being played, like, between 10 and 20 seconds. Like, what kind of a move is bishop e5? That's such an unnatural move. What? What does it do? I don't know. Bishop c5 check would be a far more natural move, for example. I think you can all agree with me there. Okay, let's go rook c2. What's the idea of this very cryptic move? What's the idea? Because I can't figure it out. I assume rook b6. No, he's giving a check. Okay. Oh, it's to cover d6. So my king gets forced to the back rank. So, yeah, okay, sure. You're just not finding that, are you? It's just not something that a 1480 would find, quite frankly. This is pretty bad because, like, literally the game I played 2 games ago, we faced a cheater. It was completely blatant. This guy was less blatant, but it still seems pretty obvious to me. I'm going to try and make him work for it, though, by defending g7. I don't think I'm getting mated just yet. I want to try and drag the game on to see how he plays, because that's kind of a very good indicator as to whether someone's cheating or not, right? It might be that he played the opening by himself and then at some point turned the engine on and then has just been playing engine moves, but like he's maintaining the pace of, you know, playing moves between 10 and 20 seconds. Yeah, and I mean, this sets up mate in 1, right? But that also took him forever to actually find. And I don't think I can stop that whatsoever. yeah, because I mean, the knight covers these two squares, and he's playing this, and I can't stop that. That's completely unstoppable. With my knight on f6, I could have given this check, maybe, but it'll be really funny to see how long it takes him to find mate in 1. And also, like, king to d4 is, like, an immediate move in this position, for example. But if it takes him, like, 10-20 seconds to find king to d4, I mean, no, king d2, I mean, that's... It's a very unnatural move to me. I think what we'll do is I'll actually play this and see how long it takes him to take the rook. Okay, 2 seconds. He can figure that out by himself. Let's sack the knight, see how long it takes him. Go on. Oh, no, not taking it. It prolongs the checkmate because one of these pieces gets distracted. I mean, come on. Come on, this is absolutely blatant. Completely blatant. Yeah, and I mean, bishop takes is better because it keeps the king penned in, right? Of course, you can just move the bishop back now. Yeah, that's pretty obvious, and then he will deliver mate on the next move. We'll do a game analysis to see. But that seemed pretty conclusive to me. I don't see how that could be anything but cheating. And that's rough, because, like, in our last 3 games, that would have been 2 cheaters. You know? Like, that's, yeah, 94.3% accuracy for a start. Yeah, I mean, I don't know any 1500 who plays at that accuracy, to be fair. Well, okay, let's give him the benefit of the doubt. Let's go through this game. So, yeah, et5, cd5, and my opponent goes knight to f3, which is a move, and we go knight c6, and bishop d3 allows bishop to g4. And as you can see, this is good for black already. You know, minus 0.2-ish after 5 moves is pretty good. c3, e6, h3, bishop to h5. We don't need to take. There's no need. And then king f1 was, I think, clearly a mouse slip. I assume he intended to castle. And I assume my opponent was also playing this part of the game by himself. So bishop d6, bishop e3. The computer wants f5. Oh, maybe he wants to put a knight on e4. Ah, that makes sense. If something like this, let's say, I don't know, king g1 or something. Oh, no, the idea is f4, locking in the bishop. Ah, that's cool. That's cool. But knight f6, knight b to d2. We go queen to c7. Just making improving moves. Queen e2, which seemed a bit odd to me. Queen c2 is far more natural in these positions to apply pressure to h7 for when we castle. But queen e2, rook b8. Knight e7 was apparently better. Why? Let's say g3, preparing king g2 and getting the rook into the game. h6. What? Rook d8. Castle. I don't understand the point. Okay, I don't understand this knight to e7 move. I really don't get it. So we go rook b8, a3, we go a6, preparing pawn to b5, rook c1, and we go pawn to b5, locking down the c4 square. b4, which seemed like an odd move, and we castle. g4, bishop g6, bishop takes, and f takes is better than h takes. Normally, taking towards the center is a good idea, but in this scenario, taking with the f-pawn is better. Even though e6 is weak, opening the f-file is more important. And also, if we take with the h-pawn, this could be kind of scary. So f takes, king g2, e5 is inaccurate. Wow. Queen, what? Queen b7? That might be preparing the move a5, as I mentioned earlier. Rook h to e1. Rook b to e8. I don't get it. Queen d3. Bishop b8. Oh, it wants to switch them around, I think. Let's say white just shuffles. No, it wants queen to f7. Okay, I really can't explain it. I really can't. King g7, e5, take, take. Rook cd1 is a mistake. And turns out, taking with the queen isn't the best move. Taking with the bishop? I was concerned about this, but the computer just says d4. Oh, I missed the fact that after takes, I have queen to b7 check, and then I can take back. I completely missed that. Okay, that's very nice. That's very nice. So queen c3 is actually a miss. Knight f3. And it seems like around here, my opponent started cheating. What point in the game is this? Yeah, I think from about here, by the looks of it. So, bishop d6, queen d3, which is a very good move. I went rook b to c8, rook h to e1, you know, top engine move. Rook f e8, and g5, which again is the top engine move. What I don't get is, if you're going to play g5, why not play it immediately? To me, that makes much more sense. But not to the engine. So take, as I said, I have to throw this in, because if I move my knight, then, yeah, my position is completely dead. So take, knight h5, rook d5, bishop f4, and rook c5 is the top engine move. The computer does want me to take. So I was thinking, okay, if bishop takes, I'm completely winning after take and bishop to c1. Although I do also just have this. So it's completely winning. But what I was concerned about was b takes. And I was like, this is actually a really scary pawn. How do I stop that? If rook c8, then my rook is basically being dominated by this bishop. You know, move like bishop d4, and I don't like this. So I went bishop d6. He takes on c8, top engine move, rook d1, which makes sense. Bishop f4 is inaccurate. Knight f4 check is better. Of course, if take then take, that's good for me. But what if the king just moves? Then bishop b8. Okay, I guess. I don't get it, but sure. Bishop f4, rook d7, which rook d7 is the best move. But I also don't... It doesn't look right from a human perspective, because it's like, you're not hitting anything, you know? Rook c3 is inaccurate because of rook d8 check, which this position, by the way, is good for black, unless white finds this move. Which, again, it isn't natural, because the only way it works is with this checkmating net. This is the only way that it works, right? The computer finds this? I thought I was getting mated. Oh, I have d5. I completely missed the fact that I have these two squares. Oh, wait, no, but I was concerned about... Oh, no, bishop c7, the point is... Yeah, no, I saw this move, but then there's rook d7, of course, right? That just loses on the spot. So bishop c5... And if I don't play this, I'm completely losing. Yeah, no, I saw this move. Sorry, I mixed up my moves. What I was concerned about is, let's say I play a move like h6, then after knight d4, my only move is to sack the rook or sack the bishop, because this is mate. You know, if something like takes, then just mate. So bishop c5. I mean, okay, that's a very sophisticated mating net to be setting in what 10 seconds or something. King e6 is the only move. Knight d4 check anyway. King e5 is the only move. Knight e2... What? Because knight takes b5, setting this up. I have rook c5, though. bc5, ab5, and if c6, king e6... Alright, then. Knight e2 is a mistake, apparently. How long did he spend on knight e2? How long did he spend on knight e2? Where is it? 8 seconds. Okay. Rook c4, which is the only move in the position, because anything else loses to bishop d6 check. And rook e8, the king gets forced away from the defense. If king to f5, rook f8, and I'm just losing everything, right? This is game over. So I go rook to c4. bishop d4 check, king f5. King e4 is better. I couldn't figure out the difference, so I went king f5. King f3 is the best move, and the only move that holds an advantage. All right. Now, this is a blunder. I need to find bishop c7. And if rook here... Oh, okay, this is defended. What am I on about? And if check, then I can take on g5. So, rook a8, king g5, rook a6, king h4 is the idea. But I take here, rook d5 check I completely missed. I only have one move. Take, knight f6, rook e5 check is the best move. King d6, king e3 is the best move. Rook c2, knight f4 is the best move. Which, I mean, kind of makes sense, I guess. Rook a2, rook e6 check is the best move, which makes sense because you pick up the a6 pawn, of course. King e7, bishop e5 is the best move, setting up this mating idea. Rook c2, rook a7 check is the best move. King e8, knight e6 is the best move, applying pressure here. I go knight h5. And then my opponent plays the best move, bishop to d6, setting up this mating net. I give a check. And yeah, see, this is hilarious because king d4 is inferior to king d2, right? This is why I was throwing in these checks, because I wanted to see whether he'd play the exact best move or not, because that's a very good way of telling. I think everyone here would agree that king d4 is very natural, and after this, you can just move the king up the board. No, not like that. Apparently, I'm mating you now, which is actually hilarious. But you can just go king to e5, and then I have nothing. But the thing is that mate takes longer. King d2 is a quicker mate. And then I give up my rook anyway because I have nothing else. And then I go knight to f4 check. And it's funny because knight f4 is mate in 4, but bishop f4 is mate in 3. So, of course, he takes with the bishop. I go g5, bishop to d6, and then, of course, that's just mate. No, I think my opponent definitely cheated. I don't think he was cheating the whole game, because, I mean, his opening certainly wasn't the best. But then again, his time usage in the opening was very different. Like, for example, he spent a minute on the move bishop to d3. I'm sorry, but if someone's finding mating nets like that, you're not taking a whole minute over move 5, which is a very, like, normal-looking move, right? 30 seconds on a move like c3, playing something like pawn to a3, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense in 30 seconds. A minute spent on the move g... Whoa, why is the game bugging? Give it a sec. The game is absolutely bugging. What? Okay, I don't know why my side of the screen is like that. There we go. A minute on g4. And then, blitzing out these following moves because they're natural-looking moves, right? Take, 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 take. Rook c to d1. Queen c3. And I think around here, he probably started cheating because here it was, like, perfection from then on. The only move that he went wrong out of the, like, remaining, I don't know, 30 moves was with knight to e2, I believe. Yeah, knight to e2 on move 34. Because, like I said, knight takes b5 is better. Although, I think on a higher depth, the engine might prefer this move. So, that I'm not so sure about. But the rest of it, I mean, is pure perfection. And the way that he, like, came up with that mating net, nah, no way. No way. I mean, 2 different mating nets in a very computer-like fashion. Firstly, of course, the this mating net that he set up with rook d8 check and bishop to c5, trying to go knight to d4 and trap my king. Finding that in like 20 seconds, I mean, come on now. And then, of course, the mating net that he set up later with bishop to e5 and bishop to d6. That kind of thing is very unnatural, right? To me, like, it makes way more sense to just do this. because the knight is under attack. I don't have this because of this, or even knight e6 is more clinical. That's a far more natural approach, but the engine doesn't care because it sees a potential mate after knight to e6, right? Not a very human-like approach whatsoever. So I think I think I'm pretty happy with like calling this a cheat, a cheating game. I think my opponent definitely cheated here. Please let me know your thoughts down below. I don't know if I'm being too harsh or not, but there's just no way. The time usage is completely off. The sort of maneuvering moves that he's playing are completely engine-like, and the mating nets that he was finding were ridiculous, particularly compared to his play earlier in the game where we had a very nice position out of the opening. So, yeah, way too many things off with that game. And also, I mean, for me, the most hilarious one was knight to f4 check, where if I refer back to this, my opponent spent 20 seconds deciding which piece to take the knight with. I mean, you don't need 20 seconds for that. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Just take the knight, you know? It's it's so obvious, but not to someone using an engine it isn't. So, yeah. Hopefully you guys still learned a lot from this game, and hopefully you still enjoyed it. But like, that's tough. That's tough. Hopefully this guy gets banned because I mean he has to be cheating. He just has to be cheating. It's not the fact that I lost; it's the manner in which I lost, right? And the difference with his play earlier in the game compared to later in the game. But yeah, I mean, we literally had a video a couple of days ago where I faced a cheater, which I will link up here, which was completely blatant. But yeah, if you want to see the previous episodes of the speedrun as well against some non-cheaters, which is a shocker for chess.com, I know, check out the playlist down here. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in one of those videos.